All right, today we're going to do something a little different. We're going to crack open one of those super dense, confusing government documents, you know the kind, and we're going to find the human story that's hidden inside all that jargon. Let's dive in. So, have you ever gotten a letter like this in the mail? I mean, look at it. It's got the official seal, all this super complex legal language, just walls of text. It's definitely designed to look serious. And let's be honest, it's pretty intimidating. But what if I told you that buried in all that official speak is actually a story? A story about the system, working the way it's supposed to. Okay, so let's just start at the top. What exactly are we looking at here? Yeah, the title itself is a total mouthful, but let's break it down. When you translate it, it's actually pretty simple. It's a decree for the cancellation of a tax assessment. So, in plain English, this is basically an official letter from the tax office saying, "Oops, our bad. We made a mistake on a bill we sent you, and we're officially canceling it." You know, it's easy to forget that behind every one of these official documents, there's a real person. And in this story, that person is a taxpayer named Desi. This letter, this is kind of the final chapter of her whole journey with the tax system. So, to really get why this letter is such a big deal, you gotta understand the stakes. If you look at that column labeled Samula, that means original amount. You see the initial bill. We're talking over 16 million rupiah. That is a lot of money. And that's how much Desi was originally told she owed. Okay, so that's the big question, right? How in the world do you go from a bill for over 16 million rupiah to getting a letter that cancels the whole thing? What happened in between? Well, let's see what the document itself has to say. The answer is actually right here on the first page. See this section called Menimbang. That basically translates to considering. This is the part of the letter where the government literally lays out its thought process. It's their official, here's why we're doing what we're doing section. And if you wade through all that dense legal text, what you find is a really clear, logical process. So first, someone, presumably Desi, submitted a request to review that original tax bill from back in June of 2025. Then, the tax office actually launched a formal investigation because of that request. And finally, number 3, that investigation came to a conclusion: the original bill was wrong. Simple as that. Right. But here's the thing. A government agency can't just, change its mind on a whim. Any decision they make, especially one that cancels a huge tax bill, has to be backed up by law. So what gives them the authority to do this? Okay, check out this next page. Under the heading Mengingat, which means recalling, you find what is basically the legal works cited page for this whole decision. It's just a long list of laws and regulations. Now, we don't need to read every single one, but the fact that it's here is super important. It shows this wasn't some random decision. It's all based on a solid legal foundation. And you know what? The most important legal bit is actually mentioned right back on the first page. It points to one specific article of the law, Pasal 36. This right here is the key. This is the clause that gives the Director General of Taxes the authority to cancel incorrect tax assessments. It's the exact legal tool they needed to make this whole thing happen. All right, so we've got the problem, that massive bill. We've seen the reasoning, the investigation, and we know they have the legal authority. So now, it's time for the climax of our little bureaucratic drama, the final official verdict. And the verdict is delivered right here, in this really powerful section, Menetapkan. That translates to decree. I mean, that's a strong word, right? This is the point where the government stops explaining and just starts declaring. This is the final word on the matter. And the table just lays it all out, crystal clear. You have the original tax bill, over 16 million rupiah. And then, right below it, the amount canceled, negative 16 million rupiah. The math is super simple, but the result, wow, it's powerful. Which means the final amount due is 0, a big fat 0, the entire bill gone, completely wiped out, a total reversal, all thanks to that investigation. And to make it all official, you see the date right there. This decision was set in stone on January 14th, 2026. And just like that, the whole thing is over. Okay, so we've cracked the code on one letter for one person, but so what? Why does this matter to the rest of us? What's the big picture here? What can we learn from this stack of paper? When you lay it out on a timeline, the whole story really comes together. It all started back in June 2025 with that incorrect bill. Now, it took a while, over 7 months, but by January of 2026, an investigation report confirmed the mistake, and then literally the very next day, they issued this letter and officially corrected the error. It just goes to show you the system might be slow, but there is a system. And that really gets to the heart of why this matters. This document is proof that official decisions aren't always the end of the story. They can be challenged. It shows us that there are actual formal processes for fixing mistakes. So look, if you ever get a letter from the government that just doesn't seem right, the big takeaway here is don't panic. There are ways to appeal. This whole letter is a perfect example of checks and balances in action. And just knowing that these processes exist, that's incredibly empowering. So yeah, in the end, this letter is a success story, right? An error was made, it was caught, and it was corrected. That's great. But it does leave us with a much bigger question, doesn't it? This was one person's successful appeal after a mistake was made. The real challenge is, how can we design these systems to be so clear and so accurate from the very beginning that a letter like this is never even needed? Now that's something to think about.